Today we're going to work on a different method to multiply binomials. This method is commonly known as the FOIL method, and it just is an algorithm on how to multiply binomials. So first, let's just identify what are products of two binomials and what are not. So our first expression, 2x times x squared, that product is a product of monomials, so that would be no. And then our second expression here, we have 2x times x squared plus 1. So we have a monomial, that would be the 2x, times a binomial, that would be the x squared plus 1. So we have a monomial times a binomial, so this would be no as well. And then our next expression, we have x plus 4 times x minus 3. So we have a binomial times a binomial. So this would be yes, this would be a product of binomials. Let's do a couple more. We have x plus 5 times x squared plus x minus 3. So we have a binomial times a trinomial. So this would be no, it is not a product of two binomials. And then our last one, we have 8x plus 7. That's a binomial. And then we have 9x squared minus 6x. This is also a binomial. So we do have a binomial times a binomial, which means we have a product of two binomials. So the FOIL method is a way for us to remember how to multiply two binomials. So remember, when you multiply binomials, you're distributing every term in the first term by everything in the second term. And then you're multiplying everything in you're distributing the second term to everything in the second binomial. So the way that the FOIL method helps us is that the letters tell us which terms to multiply together. So let's say we have a binomial and the terms are represented by A, B, C, and D. And those terms can be anything. For right now, we're just using A, B, C, and D to show how it works. So the first thing we do is we distribute our first term to the first term, our first binomial to the first term of our second binomial. So we're doing first, right? The first terms. So A times C. And so first terms, that F that's in first corresponds with the F in FOIL. And then we'll take our first term and we will multiply it by the last term and the second binomial. So if you notice, we're doing the outer terms, like it's like the A is the outer term and D is the outer term. So we're doing the outer terms, we're doing A times D, and the O in outer corresponds to the O in FOIL. Next, we'll take our second term in our first binomial and multiply it by the first term in our second binomial. So we have B times C. And if you notice, we're doing the inner terms, right? These are on the inner, they're in the middle here. And so the inner terms, the I in inner corresponds with the I in FOIL. And so then lastly, we'll do our last terms. We'll do the last term of our first binomial times the last term of our second binomial. So last terms, B times D, and the L in last corresponds with the L in FOIL. So now that we have multiplied, we take these products, we simplify them if we can, and then we add them all together. And that will be our answer after we combine any like terms. So let's do an example multiplying two binomials using the FOIL method. So we're going to multiply x plus 2 times x plus 6. So we start with f first. So our first terms are x, and x times x is x squared. Now we'll do O, which is our outer terms. So our outer terms are x and 6. So x and times 6 is 6x. Then we'll do our inner terms. So our inner terms are 2 and x. So 2 times x is 2x. And then we'll do our last terms. Our last terms are 2 and 6. So 2 times 6 is 12. So that means that we have 12. So here's our answer, x squared plus 6x plus 2x plus 12. This was our first, our outer, our inner, and our last. And if you notice, 6x plus 2x, those are like terms, which means they can be combined. 6x plus 2x is 8x. So we simplify, and we get x squared plus 8x plus 12 as our final simplified answer. Our next example will multiply y plus 6 times 4y minus 9. So we'll start with our first terms, which is y times 4y. So y times 4y becomes 4y squared. And then we'll do our outer terms. So our outer terms are y times negative 9. So y times negative 9 becomes negative 9y. Now we will do our inner terms. Our inner terms are 6 times 4y. And 6 times 4y becomes 24y. Now we will do our last terms. Our last terms are 6 and negative 9. Negative 9. And 6 times negative 9 is negative 54. So now we have our answer here, 4y squared minus 9y plus 24y minus 54. And then we can combine like terms. We can combine negative 9y plus 24y. That becomes 15y. So now our final simplified answer is 4y squared plus 15y minus 54. So the FOIL method can be done mentally when you get the hang of it. However, when you do it mentally, you have to be very carefully that you remember to combine like terms. I would recommend to go ahead and do the FOIL method the way that we've been doing for a while until you get really, really good at it. Just because when you do it mentally, there's so many chances for mistakes. So make sure that you really understand the FOIL method before you start trying to do it mentally. I will do some examples to show what it looks like once you are being able to do it mentally. Example 3 will multiply 3a minus 5 times a plus 3. So mentally I'm thinking f for first, so 3a times a is 3a squared. And then I'll think the next letter in FOIL is O, which is my outer. So I have 3a times 3, which is 9a. And then I think the next letter in FOIL is I, which is inner. So that would be negative 5 times a. So that's negative 5a. And then I think, well, the last letter is L in FOIL, and L stands for the last terms. And my last terms are negative 5 and 3. So negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. Now I can combine like terms. 9a minus 5a becomes 4a. And my final simplified answer is 3a squared plus 4a minus 15. Okay, so we need to be super careful when we're squaring a binomial, because if you see something like this, a plus b squared, you can't just distribute this exponent. That does not become a squared plus b squared. Now, if this was a times b and then squared, that's when you would do, it's called the power of a product rule. But this is not a power of a product, this is a power of a sum, and there's no such thing, right? So when you see this, when you see a plus b squared, it's not distributing the square. Like, this is not correct at all. What you need to do, if you do a plus b squared, remember the exponent tells you how many times to repeat this factor. So if your factor is a plus b, So that means a plus b squared is going to be a plus b times a plus b, which means that we can use the FOIL method to correctly square that binomial. So let's try that. Let's do 2x minus 5 squared. So remember, what we're not going to do is just distribute the square. That would be illegal. What we will do is go ahead and expand that. 2x minus 5 squared is actually 2x minus 5 times 2x minus 5. Now we can use FOIL. We'll start with our first terms. 2x times 2x is 4x squared. Then we'll do our outer terms. 2x times negative 5 becomes negative 10x. Then we'll do our inner terms. Negative 5 times 2x is negative 10x. Then we'll do our last terms. Negative 5 times negative 5 is positive 25. Then we'll combine like terms. Negative 10x minus 10x, that becomes minus 20x. So now we have 4x squared minus 20x plus 25. All right, I want to go ahead and look at example 5 in your textbook on page 386. This is an example of a word problem and how to use binomials in word problems. And it really is, what we're doing is we're modeling real life applications. So this is why we need to learn how to multiply binomials and how it's useful in everyday life. So in example 5, they have a rectangular swimming pool, and they have sides of the swimming pool that are in a ratio of 3 to 2. If the pool is surrounded by a 5-foot wide concrete walkway, write a polynomial expression for the total area of the pool and walkway. So we first have to remember that area is length times width, right? So we just need to figure out what the length is and what the width is. So remember, the pool has a ratio of 2 to 3, which means that if the width is 2, the length is 3, then if you multiply something by the width, you multiply that same thing by the length. So your width is going to be 2x and your length is going to be 3x. However, you do have that 5-foot walkway, and the walkway is on every side. So instead of being 2x plus 5 for your width, you're actually going to be 2x plus 10, because you have 5 on one side of the width and you have another 5 on the other side of the width. So you have 2x plus 5, which is actually 2x plus 10. And then when you look at your length is 3x, but then you have a 5-foot walkway on each side, so that becomes 3x plus 10. So remember, area is length times width, so that means we need to multiply the length and the width. So we need to multiply 2x plus 10 times 3x plus 10. So we'll do our first terms first. 2x times 3x, that's 6x squared. So I multiply 2x and 3x, my first terms. Then we'll multiply our outer terms. So 2x times 10, which is 20x. Then we'll multiply our inner terms. 10 times 3x becomes 30x. And then we'll multiply our last terms. 10 times 10 becomes 100. We'll simplify. 20x plus 30x is 50x. So our final answer becomes 6x squared plus 50x plus 100. All right, go ahead and try some problems on your own.